ذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ شَاقُّوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. That is because they were opposed and they had shown animosity and disobedience to Allah and His Messenger. وَمَنْ يُشَاقِّ اللَّهَ, and whoever would show animosity and opposition to Allah, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ, then certainly Allah is intense in taking revenge. Shiqaq is actually to be in a schism, to not be in agreement, to want to just oppose everything the other is saying, to take a tough stance against someone, hadda. To be in opposition to someone on all issues, shaqqa. We saw al-hidad in the previous, and we're seeing al-shiqaq in this surah. So, فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ شَدِيدُ الْعِقَابِ. مَا قَطَعْتُم مِّن لِينَةٍ. Then these Jews, these Banu Nudayr, particularly of the three tribes of the Jews, Banu Nudayr had the sharpest tongue. They had the most things to say. So actually even before this happened, they used to, when the Muslims came back from Uhud, they're like, yeah, it was tough for you, huh? And Badr, you guys won, huh? You beat the Quraysh. But one day if you ever fight us, you'll find out what fighting really means. We'll show you what fighting really is. Those mice of Quraysh, they go easy on you. We'll show you what a fight's all about. They used to talk trash to the Muslims all the time. You're lucky we have a treaty. That sort of thing. Okay? Then when the fort was surrounded, there were certain palm trees. There were certain tall palm trees. And it was a strategic advantage to expose the fort entirely. It was a strategic advantage to the Muslims to cut those trees, some of them, so that the fence could be exposed, right? So the Prophet ﷺ commanded that some of those trees should be cut. So the Jews started calling from the inside, what kind of prophet is this? He cuts trees. Look at this prophet, how righteous, he's cutting perfectly good trees. And so the Muslims are like, what? Yeah, it is kind of not nice to cut trees. What's God's verdict? The ayah came, مَا قَطَعْتُم مِّن لِينَةٍ. There's not a single nice, beautiful tree that you cut. He didn't even say shajaratin. He said linatin, because linatin gives lean. Lean is the soft date. We mentioned that yesterday, right? Linta lahum in the dars. I'm from Ali Imran. But anyway, lina is a tree that has really good dates. So Allah says, yes, those trees were juicy. And actually the Jews weren't that worried that this isn't prophetic. They were worried that this was a means of their agriculture. They were worried that their economic supply was being cut. So Allah says, not a single tree did you chop down, أَوْ تَرَكْتُمُوهَا قَائِمًا, or you left it standing, because they didn't cut all of them. The ones that were strategically important to remove, the Muslims removed. أَوْ تَرَكْتُمُوهَا قَائِمَةً عَلَى أُصُولِهَا, or you left them standing on their roots. فَبِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ, then all of that was sanctioned by Allah. In other words, when the messenger gave you that instruction, there's no difference between that and that having divine sanction. That having divine sanction. Now, in between these two surahs, between Mujadala and Hashr, you're learning about the subtlety of revelation. On the one hand, the Prophet ﷺ is not going to open his mouth until ayah comes. You saw that, right? The woman's got an issue and he's not saying anything until the ayah comes. But when it came to cutting the trees, did he wait for the ayah to come? No. Because that's also a revelation. When should he stay silent and wait for Quran? And when should he give a verdict? That's also a part of revelation. That's also the kind of wahi he gets. And wahi literally, as I've mentioned to you before, is ishara, is an indication. Like you do wahi to your family. Like I'm going to do wahi to that boy over there. That's wahi. Ishara, just be quiet. Shh, don't say anything. I don't have to say the word. Ishara. So there's a feeling in his heart that I shouldn't say something. And there's an inclination in him, yes, cut these trees. No problem. And then on top of that, Allah, basically justifies it. And sanctions it. This is actually the legitimate thing to do following the Prophet ﷺ. وَلِيُخْزِيَ الْفَاسِقِينَ. And all of this is done to humiliate the corrupt. So, they tried to humiliate the Prophet using this incident. But Allah says this was done to humiliate you people. وَمَا أَفَاءَ اللَّهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ. This is a very deep subject. Something that you guys from the new batch of Dream students, you didn't cover with me because this was Surah Al-Anfal, way back. Surah Al-Anfal. And Surah Al-Anfal is a surah about the spoils of war. And there are two major places in the Quran where money is being distributed as a result of military expedition are discussed. This is the second. The first is Surah Al-Anfal. And both of them are very important places in understanding Muslim morale. Because this is a matter it was directly tied to Muslim morale and how Islam cultured the attitudes of Muslims. So a new policy was revealed. And to understand it, you have to understand the concept of fay'. Fay'. Fay' is basically fa, ya, and hamza, by the way. Fa, ya, and hamza. And the fi'l used here is afa'a, which is the same as aqama. Afa'a yufi'u ifa'atan fahuwa mufi'un. Like that. Right? Fay' literally means ma rad, what was left behind. Wa ma a'ada, what came back. Ma radda wa ma afad, wa ma a'ada. That's the meaning of fay'. But let's discuss it in the historical context. What does the word mean? When Muslims go to war and the enemy leaves shields behind, swords behind, that's all called anfal. Malul ghanima or al-anfal. Extras that are left behind. And they are supposed to be distributed a certain way. A fifth of it goes to Baytul Mal, and a portion goes to this and that, and then the rest is distributed among the soldiers, among those who went to battle. And among the soldiers, those who have horses, they get twice than those who are on foot, because those who have horses have their own expense in the travel of the journey, and the expense of their horse. And they're taking on more liability, so they get twice. And there's this distribution mentioned in Surah Al-Anfal. That's taken care of there. There's a really awesome story behind how that was taken care of too. One part of it should be mentioned. And that is, before Islam, the policy on the battle was, whatever you find is yours. But once the battle's over and the enemy left, you picked up 10 shields, 5 swords, this, that, the other, you saw a goat running around, you grabbed it, it's all yours. After Islam, the Prophet ﷺ said, some of you stand guard, some of you go meet the enemy, some of you stand here, some of you stand there. Are all positions equally profitable when the battle's over? No. So the guy that was standing guard didn't get to go run and grab everything, because he's standing guard. So he starts complaining, hey, I didn't get anything. That's not fair, I was positioned over here. And the guy in the front line got everything. And there's a fight breaking out among the Sahaba, like an argument's happening. What do you get? What do I get? What do you get? What do I get? There's a fight breaking out. And I compare it to, Zaid. You went to Toys R Us, and you have a huge bag of toys you walk in with in the house. What happens with the kids? That's mine. And then the mom gets angry. Dad gets angry and says, okay, nobody gets anything. That's what happened in Surah Al-Anfal, by the way. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَنْفَالِ They ask you about the spoils of war. Tell them, قُلِ الْأَنْفَالُ لِلَّهِ وَالرَّسُولِ Tell them. That's it. Stop fighting. All of it belongs to Allah and the Messenger. But فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهِ وَأَصْلِحُوا ذَاتَ بَيْنِكُمْ وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ Allah yelled, scolded the believers for 40 ayat in Surah Al-Anfal. 43 ayat. Then he told them, okay, you get a fifth. The Messenger of Allah gets a fifth, and the rest can be divided among you, whatever. The rules for division weren't given in the beginning of the surah. First you were told, calm down. Nobody gets anything. It's all for Allah and His Messenger. You happy now? Awesome. This is going to be a second lesson, a similar one. So the Muslims, their priorities were set straight. Now, this battle we went into, was there a fierce fight between us and Banu Nulayr? No. We went and surrounded the fort, and they came out. Who already took credit for defeating the enemy? Allah did, by using a weapon that nobody could have thought of, which is fear into their hearts. Allah says, مَا أَفَاءَ اللَّهُ عَلَى رَسُولِهِ Whatever Allah brought back out of the spoils, special spoils, spoils that come without fights. The spoils that come as a result of a military expedition in which there wasn't a fight. Minhum. So whatever Allah brought back upon His Messenger from the enemy, وَمَا أَوْجَفْتُمْ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ خَيْلٍ وَلَا رِكَابٍ And you did not actually ride your horses against them, using your horses and your camels. You didn't ride up on the enemy and engage in battle with them. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَلِّطُ رُسُلَهُ عَلَى مَنْ يَشَاءُ However, the fact of the matter is, Allah imposes His authority, the authority of His messengers on whoever He wants. In other words, the authoritative victory didn't come at the hand of a single of one of you pulling a sword. That's not how it came. This victory, the credit goes entirely to Allah. وَاللَّهُ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٍ That Allah is in complete control over all things.